What's going on, everybody? This is Black Men Sundays. I'm your host, Corey Sylvester Murray, and we're talking about generational wealth, finance, business, and mental health.
It's a Black Man Sunday. Time to put all childish things away. I refuse to be the man I was yesterday. Gotta put my best foot forward and elevate.
And before we introduce today's guest, my brother Eric from Huntsville, aka Hunts Vegas, who do you have for our Black Men Sunday Spotlight, my brother?
Hey Corey, thank you, man. It's good to see you. We've been gone for a while, so I'm glad to be back again for all of us. So I'm gonna go ahead and get right to it. Today's spotlight, we're gonna talk to a brother. His name is Dr. William Conan Davis, and he's the first black man to receive a PhD from the University of Idaho in 1965. Guess what? This guy is also credited with the formula for the Dasani brand water for Coca-Cola. And if you may have noticed his name or remember his name, guess what? He's also the brother of the famous actor Ossie Davis. Now, Dr. Davis, he led a remarkable career as a researcher, as food chemist, and education. His career was set in the motion when his father took him on a road trip from the family home in Valdosta, Georgia, to the Tuskegee Institute in Alabama. There, the young Davis attended a workshop with George Washington Carver and Henry Ford. Now, seeing African American professors and scientists in action inspired Davis to become a chemist. Now, Dr. Davis is also credited for instant mashed potatoes, the soft serve ice cream that we eat, and the industrial glue. He also standardized medical tests for insulin and growth and hormones. Now, working with St. Philip's College colleague, the late Vice President of Academic Affairs, Dr. Lanier Boyd, and Dr. Davis studied the characteristics of drinking water and co-created the formula for the Dasani brand formula. That's my spotlight for today. Dr. William Conan Davis, which was born on August 22nd, 1926. Back to you.
You know, I like how you threw that Skeggy reference in there, Valdosta, Georgia. And I think when I worked with you in Tampa Bay, I did a news story about the water with the Dasani water. We
Mhm.
did one with the Avion, and then
Right.
Zephyr Hills was down the street, and we did
Mhm.
which sparkling or purified water was the
Right.
cleanest. And
Right.
everybody was like, "Oh, the Zephyr Hills or the Avion." And the Dasani one. And I was like, oh, that Dasani kind of had a weird flavor to it, but it was the cleanest drinking water. So
Yeah.
yeah, I appreciate that spotlight, my brother. And welcome back, man. Black Men
Hey, welcome to you.
Sundays.
Welcome back too. It's been a minute, so glad.
Yeah, definitely, man. So, hey, without further ado, man, let's go and introduce today's guest, man. First off, I'd like to thank everybody that listens to Black Men Sundays or watches us on YouTube or News 6 Plus. This is show 144. We have 144 shows. So, if you're new to Black Men Sundays, you have 144 hours of Black Men Sundays. So, if you don't know anything about investing, if you don't know how to purchase a home, if you're buying a bunch of sodas, if you're eating a bunch of salts. Yeah, Black Men Sundays. We also talk about mental health on here. So let's go and introduce today's guest. I'm very excited to have this brother on. We have Phillip Woolfolk. This brother's out of Trenton, New Jersey, the capital. This brother has over 20 plus years in banking experience, and he's also a former banking executive. He serves on several boards. Remember, we've had brothers on the show that serve on boards. We've had brothers on the show that are in the African American Chamber of Commerce of Central Florida. Guess what? This brother is the COO of the African American Chamber of Commerce of New Jersey, where we're talking about equitable small business initiatives. We're going to get into all that today. This brother is also the managing director of Phillip Speaks LLC and the founder of Main Street Advisory LLC, an alternative business lender. And this brother also is the author of Triumph in the Trenches, Volume 2. You got to check Volume 1, but I checked Volume 2 out, The Foundations for Change. So without further ado, Phillip Woolfolk, brother, welcome to Black Men Sundays. How you doing?
I'm doing great, Corey. Thank you so much for having me.
Definitely. So I'm gonna just jump right in, man. I see founder of Main Street Advisory LLC, an alternative business lender. Because when I think, first off, a lot of brothers that listen to Black Men Sundays, we have a lot of brothers in the C-suite listening. We have a lot of small business brothers listening, but we also have a lot of brothers that say, okay, I have an LLC, but I'm not doing anything with it. I have a business, but I don't really have a good business plan.
Right.
So When we're talking about getting money for our business, when we're talking about lending, I want to start right there. Why alternative business lending versus just going to a regular bank and, getting that?
Oh, absolutely. So just to give a little bit of context to that, Corey, I spent over 40 years as a real estate investor. And one of the things I've learned over the course of that time is that there's a loan for everybody depending on what your situation and circumstance is. And as a former banker, I can tell you that not every person that comes into the bank for a loan gets approved. There are some loans that banks don't necessarily have an appetite for. I'll give you an example. One of my strategic partners in the banking industry refers deals to me that their bank don't have an appetite for. So because of things that happened during the pandemic, there are some lenders that are not that interested in commercial real estate loans, for example. They may no longer be doing multifamily properties. They may not be doing mixed use or commercial real estate loans. And so for folks who are looking for that type of funding, they may have to find another source. Because of my background, I'm able to fill that void and work with folks to help them get the funding that they're looking for, whether they're a real estate investor, a developer, an entrepreneur that's looking for equipment financing or working capital. So that's where I fill the void there. That gives folks another alternative over and above the traditional lending resources.
Got you. And as far as, some more advantages, versus a norm. I mean, we've had banking CEOs come on the show, vice presidents come on the show, but what advantages does the alternative business lending have if I'm a startup business, for example?
Right, right. Well, one of the things is if you talk to traditional bankers, most traditional bankers are not interested in startup funding. For the obvious reasons, right? There's no historical revenue. There's no proof of concept. Someone comes in with an idea and basically a business plan, which might document what they plan to do, but they haven't implemented or executed that yet. And so on the traditional side, most traditional lenders may not be interested in doing that type of funding. One thing too, before we get too far in it, when you introduced me as one of the things being the Chief Operations Officer of the African American Chamber of Commerce of New Jersey. I spent about 4.5 years or so as the board treasurer for that chamber, and also spent about 3 years, a little over 3 years, as the Chief Operations Officer. I left that position in May of 2024 to basically launch Phillip Speaks LLC, to go back to my Main Street Advisory LLC, which the chamber actually was a client during the pandemic, and also wanted to get involved in a little more writing. I have a couple more book projects that are in the works, and so that's what I'm doing these days.
One thing that I'm starting to see that's really taking shape in this country, a lot of brothers we've had on this show, DEI, DEI, DEI. It was very hot for a while.
Right,
Now I see a lot of companies, a lot of businesses are doing away with it. They're saying, hey, we're going to lose funding if we keep DEI. So
right.
first off, before we even go any further with that, let's talk about that for a minute.
Right. I spent about 25 years in the banking industry. And I can share with you that I did not survive in the banking industry because somebody gave me a slot because I was Black. I managed sales and operations for a while for residential mortgage lending for the bank that I worked for at the time. I walked into my boss's office one day and shared with him that my position had become obsolete. So he said to me, "So what are you doing, firing yourself?" And I said, "Well, basically, the folks that report to me can be transitioned into the traditional mortgage banking division, and my services are no longer needed as it relates to that particular role." So he said, "Well, so what are you going to be doing?" I said, "Well, I'm good at fixing things, and it's your job to find out what it is you need to be fixed next, and then that'll be my next job. And if there's not another job, I have a successful real estate investment company, and I will not miss a meal or miss a bill." And so it's up to you. So that's how I became that bank's first vice president and fair lending manager, responsible for fair lending compliance for a 7-state market area. I'd never done that job before. didn't know anything about fair lending compliance. And about 7 months into that job, there was a fair lending compliance exam happening where I needed to be able to present our fair lending compliance program to our federal regulators, which was the Office of Thrift Supervision and the FDIC and a couple of other folks. And I basically did that job, learned that job very quickly, and presented a package that allowed the bank to get an excellent fair lending rating. So you can talk about DEI all you want. I got that job and learned that job and did that job because I was good at what I was doing.
One thing that I noticed about you is when I was looking at the Foundations for Change essay, a part of the book for the Triumph in the Trenches, Volume 2. One
Right.
thing that interested me about it was when I was looking at the African American spending, you said, quote, our consumer spending does not bring forth equity, assets, or provide any ongoing revenue or cash flow. And then I
Right.
saw you had a statistic saying that, African Americans and Latinos buy more vehicles and spend more on clothing and jewelry, but you also talked about sodas and salty snacks.
Right. Right.
So I
Right.
kind of want to talk about that a little bit out of that essay.
Oh, sure. Well, my position is this, Corey. You know, as African Americans, we spend in 2024 or 2020, 2023, 2024, roughly $1.8 trillion dollars. That's our consumer spend. So we make a significant contribution into the marketplace as relates to our spending. Now, when you think about those companies that we spend our money with, you know, a lot of the money that we spend, we're spending on things that we don't need, and we're spending money on things that are not necessarily healthy for us. And when we think about how we're received in the marketplace, just as African Americans, you know, we have folks who basically, as you can see from the pullback in the DEI realm, is that those there are companies that do not respect us, but they're happy to have our dollars. And so what we have to do is a better job at exercising our economic muscle as it relates to where we spend our money and how we spend our money. You know, when we talk about having more blacks on corporate boards, more blacks in C-suite, you know, more recruiting as it relates to, you know, historically black colleges and universities and other black college campuses across the country to begin to generate this next pool of executives that will basically run these corporations and serve on boards. You know, the companies that we spend a lot of money with, a lot of them are not doing that sort of work. You know, we saw during the death of George Floyd, we saw a bunch of companies come out, make all sorts of promises and commitments, and now that there's been a change in the environment, there are folks who basically pulling back on those promises and commitments. And so my position is basically very simple. If you don't support us and support our community, why should we spend money in your stores? Why should we spend money or invest money in your business if you're not going to at the very least live up to the promises and commitments that you've made during a very trying time in this country? And so I think if you've paid any attention lately to has happened to some of these organizations, you've seen some lose millions and millions of dollars because we have boycotted some of those establishments. And I think you know, when you think about people doing the right thing, and you go back to the Montgomery bus boycott, right? It would have been very easy to just do the right thing, but the right thing didn't come until the bus company was headed for bankruptcy, and they realized, hey, we might need black folks on these buses in order for us to keep the lights on. And so that's what forced people to do the right thing. And I think we have to become more vigilant, more determined, and more intentional about how we spend and invest our dollars. And folks get the message very loud and clear when it's an economic message. People don't respond very much in this economic environment, you know, to protest, to name calling, and to frustrations, and to all sorts of emotional responses. But you know, corporations, corporate boards, board members, they understand the bottom line. And if you're losing money, losing revenue, losing market share, losing shareholder value in terms of what your stock price is doing, that's a language they understand. And one way to get them to get their attention on that is to do what you can to have an impact on that, so that you can affect change.
Gotcha. And I just want to, you said 1.8 trillion spending power. Let's talk about how much power is that really for
Mhm.
brothers that are listening. Like, okay, 1.8 trillion, but what really is that? How much is that really?
Before I get into how much it is, because that's a lot of money, right? So let me share with you one circumstance or one situation I had as a young kid growing up in Trenton. I played flute in the pep band at the high school that I attended, right? And in that environment, I used to go into a record store every couple of weeks and I would buy an album. And one day I got home and the album was scratched. I took the album back to exchange it and was treated very poorly by the owner of the store. I went back home, sat down and wrote a letter. And in that letter, I articulated that in my high school, it was a large high school, my 10th grade class had over 1,500 students. And a good percentage of us bought records and albums at that particular record store. So what I shared with him was if I was not able to exchange my album, that I would communicate that to the musicians and the pep band, the jazz band, and other folks that I went to school with who might have frequented his store. So I come home one day and my mom says there was a call for Mr. Woolfolk from the record shop. And she realized if they were talking about records, it was probably me and not my dad. So I went down to the record store along with a few of my friends, and we got our I got my album exchanged. A couple of my buddies got free albums, and the guy said to me, you can't threaten a man's business that way. So what I understood at a very young age is, business people understand dollars if they don't have the wisdom to understand, morality and integrity. They understand that if people stop shopping in their store, that's not a profitable way for them to stay in business. So as you expand that out over, millions of us across the country spending millions and millions of dollars over $1.8 trillion, then our ability to affect change is very significant if we're united and what it is we want and how it is we want to go about getting that and achieving that. And so I think that as we get more vigilant around that particular methodology, will be more respected. And people respect you when they understand that you know what your power is. And all too often, we think of ourselves individually. Individually, Phil Woolfolk stopping, not going to a particular store, won't have a lot of impact on the bottom line. But if Phil Woolfolk and Corey and Eric and Kalali and a couple million more of us decide, we're not going into that store anymore, or at least until something changes, then collectively we have more significant impact, and our voice resonates much louder and much more clear.
Gotcha. Yeah, and that's great information. Yeah, I actually read that in the essay. I really was only going to read 3 or 4 pages of the essay. Then I got sucked in. I'm like, I'm already at the bio. I must be almost done. So I was really, really interested in that. That's
Thank
why
you.
I had a couple quotes that I was. But another thing that I noticed, because our show, we also talk about investing, whether we're talking about real estate, stocks, brothers invest in crypto. But one thing that I saw, you said invest in Africa. I thought that was very interesting. I've had one brother that said, he had invested in Ghana, but
Right.
outside of him, I've not really heard about people investing much in Africa. So let's talk about that concept.
Oh, absolutely. Well, my wife and I had an opportunity this past October of 2024 to spend some time in Ghana. And what it allowed me to really do and see more clearly is that our global presence in terms of how we are viewed really takes on a different shape when it's united. If you look at the continent of Africa and you look at, how the continent from hundreds of years ago was broken up into all these little countries, right? These small individual countries, it makes it appear that Africa is small. But the continent of Africa is a wealth of resources far beyond what a lot of other countries have. And and the unfortunate thing is that through systemic racism and colonialism and all the other isms that go into taking control of something that doesn't actually belong to you, we've lost our homeland to folks who basically have taken it over, and they've taken it over by using economic tactics that include, the World Bank and other organizations that lend billions and billions of dollars for infrastructure investments and all those kinds of things at usury rates, where these countries cannot afford to pay, and so they become held captive by some of those loan structures, and through that they give up their resources. So you get, gold and diamonds out of Africa for pennies on the dollar. You bring them over here, and all of a sudden, a diamond ring is $10,000. Well, the person who pulled that out of the diamond mine, might have only made $2 or $3 for a day's labor.
Let's also talk about because I feel like I hear a lot of brothers now with the economic climate, they're having investment issues where they're like, okay, I'm investing in this company, the stocks are down, but I
Hmm.
but I always say, I try not to be an emotional investor, so I have my
Right.
accountant that takes care of that. I just kind of set it and forget it because I understand it's a long game, not the short game, but I see a lot
Abs
of people invest
Absolutely.
and they start playing the short game. And each day out, sometimes you'll see it, stocks are down, then it goes up a little bit, but it's down more than it's up. So what confidence can we have in having a diverse portfolio these days? Is that
Right.
something that you would recommend using a professional? Because a lot of people use the different apps and they do it themselves to save
Right.
that
Right.
that fee. But I'm like, what? I'll pay that 3 to 4%, 5% fee for
Right.
their knowledge because I know at some point the way the stock market's been over the last 30, 40 years, it always goes up. It may go down a little bit, but it always goes up. So
Right.
when we're talking about building a portfolio now, how do we have confidence in these companies outside of, okay, well, they have a great dividend, but how do we have confidence in these companies when you're looking at your money and it's constantly tanking?
Oh yeah, yeah. Well, my idea of investing is pretty simple, and that it is number one, like most, investment advisors would say, and I'm not an investment advisor, but one of the rules I follow is, you don't put all of your eggs in one basket. You kind of spread things out a little bit, and you're able to kind of cushion yourself. The other thing I look at is, I know as a real estate investor and as a stock investor, you look at what we consider unrealized gains or unrealized losses, right? So if you have a stock portfolio, you have X number of dollars in that portfolio, and that portfolio, drops by 15 or 20%, it is an unrealized loss, right? Just as if it goes up 20%, it's an unrealized gain. So you're not suffering a loss or a gain until you actually liquidate the asset. And so if you're in it for the long haul, and you have, some comfort with what you have invested in some specific space, you don't go to bed every night looking at the market and making decisions the next day based on what happened last night. But you do have to, if you have young children, for example, and you plan on, using the market or, investments that you might have in insurance or whatever the case may be, you're planning on utilizing those dollars to pay for college tuition, for example. It's probably not a good idea to wait until they graduate from high school and you got to make a the first tuition payment, in a couple of weeks, to liquidate the shares then, because you know, you're at the mercy of whatever the market is. So you have to do a better job planning of when you're going to need certain dollars, what you're going to use those dollars for, And so if you know you're going to need it in a few years and you're looking at the market, you might say, well, market's really up. You know, we've done 25% growth in this particular area. We're going to need that money in a few years for college tuition. You know, maybe you liquidate it then and put it somewhere safe, and you have those dollars and you're not worried about, you know, volatility as it relates to that going down when you need it. Same as you know, for someone like myself who's 66 years old, you can't put all of your eggs in a basket that requires you to hold tight for the next 30 years. You know, some percentage of your investment has to be somewhere that you can utilize it if you need it to live on, because the last thing you want to do as a retired person is to start liquidating assets that you need to live on when you need them, and when you need them happen to be a down market. You know, so you have to plan and have some foresight as it relates to that. You know, when I first got involved in, you know, stock investing, for example, I didn't know anything about stock investing, but what I did know is that there were certain products that I had at home that I used that were from companies that were considered good companies and profitable companies. You know, so, you know, if you're not sure where to start, you might start with, you know, what's in your medicine cabinet. You know, what kind of car do you drive? Is that a good company to invest in? You know, what kind of toothpaste do you use? What kind of mouthwash do you use? What kind of, you know, toilet tissue or facial tissue? What kind of hand soap? You know, all these different things. There are companies that we're spending money on every day. You know, we have a lot of young people who like sneakers. You know, I say to moms and dads, you know, you have a kid who's not in the NBA. I'm not sure why you would buy a $250 pair of sneakers, but if you bought a couple of shares of stock, you know, by the time they get out of high school, you know, you may have something that they can actually utilize. Of course, if they end up going into the NBA, $200 sneakers might be a great investment. But if they have a different career path, a tradesman or, you know, banker or attorney or stockbroker or any host of jobs that they might end up with, they don't need $250 sneakers to perform those jobs.
I wanted to go back when you were the CEO, the COO of the African American Chamber of Commerce of New Jersey, Equitable Small Business Initiative. Let's talk
Mm.
about that a little bit. But before we talk about that, let's talk about the importance of brothers even having an association with an African American Chamber of Commerce or a Chamber of Commerce in general.
Oh, absolutely. Well, that is to me is critically important. You know, growing up, my mom used to tell us that you can't live in this world by yourself. And all too often, we get involved in the business space, or even for folks who may have professions and they're in the career space, we tend to want to try to do it on our own. And unfortunately, you know, there are areas and opportunities where there's resources, opportunities, and information, and that those resources, opportunities, and information lie in and reside in associations and communities that support the growth and development of each other. You know, and so as you get involved in chambers or, you know, business and industry type associations and establish relationships, and people know what it is you do and how you do it and your value proposition and the whole nine yards, it allows you to be able to build a network of people who trust you, will do business with you, and at some point, depending on what your growth trajectory is of your business, you know, some of the folks you meet in those environments may ultimately invest in your company and help you kind of get to the next level. At the very least, you can establish relationships that may forge into, you know, mentorships and coaching and allowing you to get some of the skills and knowledge that you need to really grow and prosper and build a sustainable business. Now, the Equitable Small Business Initiative was a great opportunity for us. The chamber had, over the course of the pandemic, got a call from the New Jersey Economic Development Authority to find out if we would serve as resource partners to help the business community during the economic downturn in terms of the pandemic. And that we were able to do. We helped hundreds of companies save hundreds and hundreds of jobs and help people gain access to capital. Then we ultimately partnered with an organization that was a community development financial institution. And through that partnership, we were able to raise about $5 million to get that fund started. And that allowed us to kind of get on a path of being able to provide access to capital in terms of meaningful loans for companies to help them with their business. And so that's another avenue that folks can access when they have these associations and these strategic partnerships and relationships and associations. Even if you're not going through a process of, say, an alternative lender or a community development financial institution, a lot of major banks have relationships with chambers, and a lot of them are members of chambers. And a lot of their business comes from and through their relationship with chambers. And so if you have a relationship with a chamber, you're a member of a chamber, you've developed some relationships, people understand what you do and how you do it. You've delivered on your value proposition as it relates to how you work with folks, then that can often be an introduction, to a banker or a credit union or some entity that can help you gain the access to the capital you need for your business.
That's great information. I kind of have a few more, but I'm gonna let my brothers engage with you first.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, I'll get back with you on the back end. All right, fellas, you have a question? Let's go. Say your name and the city or state.
Sure. This is Kalali Dogbe. City is Prince Frederick, State, Maryland. First of all, thanks for spending some time with us today.
Oh, absolutely.
Appreciate it. Here's my first question for you would be just a real basic one. How'd you get involved in real estate investing?
I grew up in a low and moderate income household. My mom and dad separated when I was about 12 years old. We went through a trying time economically, being evicted a number of times. And as a young kid, with all of our stuff out on the sidewalk, I remember saying to my mom once that when I grew up, I was going to own so many houses that I'd never have to worry about a place to stay. So my motivation and interest in real estate probably started when I was 10 or 11 years old. And I remembered another occasion coming home from school. We were on welfare for a time, and I come home from school as probably 12 and a half, 13 years old. And my mother says to me that the caseworker wants to talk to me. So I go down to the welfare office, and I assume I was there because I was an at-risk youth, put that in quotes. And but the person who was talking to me didn't really seem to care much about me or my community. At least that was my interpretation. And the conversation really seemed more like an interrogation than someone who was really interested in what I was going to be doing with my life. And so what I said to her after I allowed her to finish her harsh conversation and her disposition of not necessarily caring for African American boys. I said to her, I said, ma'am, I have no idea what I'm going to do with my life. I have no idea what my career path is going to be. I know none of that. But one thing I know for sure is you can remove my name from your list because I will never be back here again. And with that, my name got removed from my mom's disbursements. And, I sold newspapers, shined shoes. As a matter of fact, I tell people I was probably one of the first payday lenders. At about 9 and a half, 10 years old, I actually used to lend money to my parents' friends between paydays. If I lent you $10, then on payday, you had to pay me back 15. And so my funny thing that happened to me as I got older, is one reason why you should never say never, is as a real estate investor, I found myself back at the welfare office to sign some papers to collect funds for a tenant who was getting a security deposit in first month's rent. So I did end up back at the welfare office, but it wasn't for benefits.
Hey, never say never, right?
Never say never. I wasn't back there for food stamps, but I did find myself back in the welfare office.
You were back in there. Um, but it's good that you were in a far different position.
Oh yeah.
So your story really interested me how you went, how you you went to your boss at a certain point and was just kind of like, hey, this job that you got me doing is irrelevant, you know
Right.
what I'm saying? Or it's obsolete. Um, I guess the question I'd like to ask about that is, so like I guess what empowered you to just be able to say, hey, or just look at the employment landscape, and say, hey, really this job that I'm doing is not, a job that's going to be relevant for the future. And my talents could be used in a better way. Was it the fact that you had other things to fall back on, or was that just part of who you are as, your personality type?
Yeah, it's my personality type. I think I'm the type of person that I like to make a contribution. And so I was in a job that no longer required my contribution. And so the interesting thing that happened there is when my supervisor finally got back to me to say, hey, the chief operations officer of the bank, the higher ups actually agree with you. And what he came back with was, in addition to that, there's some other folks who are similarly situated within the organization, who we don't think we need them anymore. The only thing is they didn't come and tell us that we don't need them anymore. They've been out playing a lot of golf, and so what the bosses decided is, the guy who said we don't need him anymore, you find him a job.
Right.
And the ones who've been playing more golf, they need to update their resume.
That's
So
yeah,
that's kind of what happened. But
yeah.
I've had I guess the entrepreneurial disposition, most of my life. And so, I think I view things a little bit differently. I think more like an owner or entrepreneur than an employee. And so, even during my years as an employee, I spent most of my banking career with an unsigned resignation letter in my briefcase. It empowered me in a number of ways. Number one, it helped me to realize that my job was always temporary. It didn't matter if I was there for 5 years or 6 years. It's a job that I have at the mercy of the owner of the company, or the higher ups within a for-profit stock, publicly traded company. And so, I remember being in my office one day, and my supervisor comes in. He's looking around, and he said, Phil, it just dawned on me, you're the only one on my team that have nothing personal in the office. There's no pictures of your family. There are no plaques. There's nothing on the walls. I said, you know why that is? I said, because this is not my office. This is your office. And I said, you see that briefcase leaning up against the wall? He said, yeah. I said, if you come in here and tell me I got till 5 o'clock to pack my desk, clean out my office, I said, I'll be out of here in 3 minutes. I got nothing to pack, And so I spent most of my career with that mindset, that basically it was my job to build, a revenue stream outside of my job, and to hold my job as a way of building some level of wealth, saving and investing, and to position myself to no longer need the job.
Gotcha. That's a gem right there. We always talk about gems on this show. That's a gem right there. I just wonder what it is with you entrepreneurial types. We got doing this show. As Corey said earlier, we've done over 100 of these shows, and
Right,
the entrepreneurial types are always the most interesting types to talk to, because you guys just don't, you know what I'm saying? You guys are always, it seems like, looking for the next hustle, looking for the next, and I wouldn't even call it a hustle, but just looking for
right.
the next, the next thing to push yourself further. And so, like, I
Oh
guess,
yeah.
and so I'm curious about that. Like what is it? What do you think it is in you that continues to have you push for the next, like, that next thing, or that next question I need to answer, or that next challenge I need to embrace, that's outside of whatever I'm doing right now.
Oh, sure. For me, it's a mindset, and I have two daughters, and
Okay.
they're older now, but when I was vice president, fair lending manager for fair lending compliance, I happened to be in Pentagon City, right across from the Pentagon, on September 11th, 2001, when the terrorists attacked the country.
Wow.
And because of that, I decided, my corporate climb was a lot less important than spending more time with my family. And I wanted to be able to do that. At the time, I was chairman of the board of trustees for a charter school. I let the bank know that I was intending on leaving. Took me about a year to transition out of my position. After that, I went to work for about 16 months as I left being the chairman of the board of that organization and became the chief administrative officer, a position I held for about 16 months. And then once I left there from 2003 to 2008, I had an opportunity to spend roughly 5 years at home with my daughters, golfing, camping, swimming, and traveling, and just enjoying ourselves. And so, I think, one of the things I used to get teased about a lot when I was younger was that I was always working, and people would say, you always got something going on. You leave the bank, you put on your work clothes, your work boots, you got your saws in the trunk, you go to one of your rental houses, you work till midnight. It's like, why are you doing this? And I used to say, well, I don't work for money, I work for freedom, right? And so to be able to walk away from a six-figure job with stock options and bonuses and great benefits and all that stuff, it is freedom, right? And so it was never for me about cars and big cars and big houses or any of that stuff. It was for me always to be able to get up one day and say, you know what? I think today I want to open up a bait and tackle shop. And if I decide to open up a bait and tackle shop, then I'm opening up a bait and tackle shop. And so that's what it's been for me. I have several friends who asked me a couple of years ago, when was I going to retire? And at that point, I had already established, but hadn't started working on it yet. I had already established Phillip Speaks LLC as being my next thing. And my objective was that was going to be my 65 to 95 job, to basically, be able to take the knowledge and skills that I've gained over the years, and convert that into a speaking career, and also began to do more writing and have some books out there to share my knowledge and experiences with others. And so, to answer your question, Kalali, is what retirement looks like to me is being able to do whatever I want to do at any part of the world I want to do it in, and continue to be able to make a difference and have some impact on my community overall. One of the things I've recently done in strategic partnership with a couple of nonprofit organizations that we like to support is we're adding those nonprofit organizations to our website. And as I'm out and about traveling around the country, speaking and doing different things, I will be promoting those organizations as organizations I want to support philanthropically. So there's always the next thing, in terms of when you make a decision, then number one, you're going to be unstoppable, and you're going to continue on to be able to make a contribution and be impactful. So that's in my DNA.
You talked about Black people and not using their economic power in a way that makes corporations respect them.
Right.
One of the ways to do that, obviously, is boycotting. Now, it's always been my point of view that boycotting is a strategy. It's one of many strategies that you can use, and if it's a proper strategy for the time period, then that's great.
Right.
But one thing that I kind of been disappointed about is that at the times that we initiate boycotts, we never actually use it as a strategy. Like,
Right.
what I mean by that is we never actually, like, okay, boycott is actually a strategy, because you may put a business you may put a business out of business, or you may
Right.
not. For instance, like when you wrote the letter to the record company, you didn't really put him out of business. You know what I mean?
Right.
But what you
Right.
did was you sent him a very direct message about how
Right.
to treat his customers. And so it's like, what I see with us is that we never have something in our back pocket that when we get to the negotiating table, we have something that we can extract from the company that
Oh,
actually
absolutely.
enable equity. And so I'm wondering what you think about that in terms of like boycotting as a way to enable a negotiation.
Oh, absolutely.
There's a question in there somewhere.
Oh yeah, I understand, Kalali, and you're absolutely right. It's not enough to, to use that as a strategy and then go back to the status quo after that because you've made your point.
Right.
To me, for it to be meaningful, you have to set some objectives around that strategy. What exactly do you want? What does respect for our community look like, right? And what respect for our community looks like to me is not just being nice to us when we come into your store to shop. What it looks like to me is you recognize us as a financial mechanism that allows you to have monumental success as it relates to your business, and you made a decision that you're going to share that wealth. And one of the ways you do that is through economic empowerment. So if you look at, and we won't have an opportunity to really chat about this very much today, but if you look at the New Jersey disparity study, for example, you have public contracts where black and brown folks have, and black folks in particular, are at the very bottom of the barrel as it relates to our receiving of public contracts. And so when you think about procurement as it relates to public contracts, and you think about procurement as it relates to the corporate structure, we're spending millions of dollars with you, right? What are you spending with us? Several years ago, I changed CPAs, not because the CPA wasn't a good CPA. It dawned on me that I had been a customer, a client for over 10 years and had several businesses and presented all of what I was doing in that environment. And not once in that 7 to 10 year time frame had I ever gotten a referral from that CPA. So, what it meant to me was, I recall referring several folks to you who are now your clients. Over the course of my work with you, I've done residential mortgage lending. I've been lending money to folks to buy homes. I've done SBA and small business lending. I've done a number of things that you know about, and you're a CPA. You haven't had one customer that needed a mortgage, uh, you know. And so I think that when it comes to how we exercise that economic power and authority, we have to recognize that if I spend a certain amount of money with Kalali's company, I would expect that Kalali is going to spend some money with me. You have contracts. Folks are doing all sorts of things for your company. They're cutting your grass. They're painting your buildings. They're doing additions onto your corporate structures. There's a bunch of building and development going on. You need sidewalks. You need plumbing, you need electrical, you need all these different things. And we have Black folks and companies and engineers and accountants and CPAs and architects and attorneys, all sorts of folks in trades and professional services. Being nice to us when we come into your store is great, but we're looking to build wealth and equity for ourselves and for our families. And so you need to spend some of those billions of dollars that you're bringing in with our community, and I think that's the strategy, Kalali, that puts meat on the bones, right? It's not just you know being able to go and eat at your lunch counter. Opening up and being able to eat at your lunch counter actually put a lot of Black restaurants out of business, and so so what are we actually doing when you think about the Negro League, for example, and our entry into the major leagues in baseball? There were probably 15 or 20 Negro League baseball teams that went out of business because we got one Black guy who made it into the major leagues. So how did that help our community?
Nah, I love that. I use the Major League Baseball euphemism in some of my conversations with people all the time, where it's like,
Yeah,
because that's the nature of integration in America, right? And
right.
this is a whole different show, but I just want to get this out real quick. That's the nature of
Oh yeah.
integration in America, right? Is that okay? You take somebody who you like, because I mean, and there's a whole situation with Jackie Robinson right now,
Mhm.
about them trying to erase his legacy.
Right.
Take somebody who you like, who you think will be suitable in the mainstream environment, right? Uh,
Yeah.
and he's not the most talented necessarily, but he's very talented. Don't get it twisted.
Right. Oh,
You know what I mean?
absolutely.
And you take him and you put him into the major leagues, and you say now we've integrated the major leagues. It's like no, there was a whole other league, you know
Right.
what I'm saying, full of great professional players. If you were really doing
Right.
integration the way we do integration, it's just like a
Right.
business merger, right? We would take the American League and we take the National League and we would take the Negro leagues and we would say, hey,
Right.
now we got three leagues and those are called the major leagues and we can
Right.
call talent
Oh, absolutely.
all,
Absolutely.
that's integration, not
Yeah.
taking,
Yeah.
even if it's the best of us, not taking the best of us and just put them in.
Oh, yeah.
And then when something happens in the league, then we say, oh, well, this is the first general manager for the major leagues. Nah, we
Yeah.
had general managers before.
Oh,
We had
absolutely. You're
team
absolutely
owners.
right.
We
You're
had,
absolutely right. I have uncles who played baseball
yeah,
and were very good baseball players. And when they were alive and with us, they could enumerate 7 or 8 ball players that were way more talented than Jackie Robinson. So,
yeah,
there's one guy they said that didn't even wear a glove. He caught the ball barehanded.
yeah, yeah, nah,
But he might not have had the right temperament to not knock your lights out if you did
right,
something wrong to
right,
him. So he was not the one to integrate. But
yeah,
to your point, the economic and equitable way of integration would be that all of our players rolled into the whole, and then some of those ball fields that were in African American communities remained open and viable ball fields, and that was one of the stops along the way when you played baseball. But colonialism doesn't work that way.
100%, 100%. I definitely appreciate your time, Philip. I'm a connect with you. I'm gonna be following you on LinkedIn and definitely excited to see what you do next.
Well, thanks. Look forward to it. Looks forward to staying in touch with you guys and getting more involved. And as I get a chance to listen to more of these episodes, Corey, you got some folks, some brothers out there doing some great stuff. It's awesome.
Yeah, definitely. All right, Eric, Gary, y'all have any questions before I jump back in?
Yeah, my quick question. My name is Gary Johnson, Jacksonville, Florida. Just quick question about what about like everything else related to economic backdrops here in the country? Obviously, we just went through an administration change, and obviously that affects a lot of things economically. How
Right.
do you basically like when you're looking into basically trying to purchase or trying to get into the real estate game and you're trying to basically approach that, how do you basically factor in certain things as far as how politically that could affect you as far as whether or not this is a buyer's market, whether or not this is a seller's market, things of that nature?
Well, I tell you, Gary, in terms of my approach to business, I approach it and go everywhere that I go based on having the feeling that I belong wherever I show up. And so, when it comes to economics, you're buying a piece of real estate, whether it's a commercial real estate, residential real estate, cash is king. So if you have the ability to either acquire the cash, have the cash to do it, or you have the ability to leverage that your credit and other resources to be able to acquire properties and other things that you want to do. The other point that I was making in Foundations of Change is that we have $1.8 trillion that we're spending into the marketplace. If we reallocate some of those dollars into our own community, whether it's real estate investment funds, whether it's restaurants, whatever the case may be, movie houses and the whole 9 yards. We don't necessarily have a money problem in our community. I've heard it said that we have a connectivity problem, right? We have a unity problem. And so if we're spending, I don't have off the top of my head how much of billions of dollars we spend on salty snacks. And I don't know how many millions of dollars we spend in coffee shops that we don't own. But what I would say is, where were you getting your coffee before? And if you're paying extra for that coffee and you're no longer paying for that, and you took out salty snacks, for 90 days out of the year, how much money would you have to invest in other avenues, whether it's for personal gain as relates to wealth creation and wealth building for your family, or whether it's investing in some company that is serving your community. We have the dollars to be able to do it. We just need to decide how we're going to spend those dollars. All too often we have folks who are spending $1,000 a month for a car payment, but they don't own the house that they live in. We got to change our way of thinking and put our dollars where it makes more sense.
Okay, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, because basically that's pretty much what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to get into the real estate game. And I'm trying to basically, but basically for the most part, I want to approach it. I want to basically be able to pre-plan for things similar to what you just basically mentioned. I
Oh
want to be
yeah.
able to, yeah. So I kind of want to be able to before I get into it, I want to approach it like how can these certain factors economically and how can I basically kind of better gauge and kind of plan for those things. So
Oh,
thank you. I
absolutely.
appreciate that.
And
Yeah.
I'll share one last thing with you, Gary, especially since you brought up the subject of real estate. I don't know if you're a home buyer yet or not, or you're looking to get involved in the real estate business, starting with you're owning your own primary residence. But what I'll say is that there are a number of agencies and organizations across the country, different states. Some of them have down payment and closing cost assistance programs. You have FHA and VA loans, which offers a ability to purchase with lower down payments. You have some banks that actually have their own down payment and closing cost assistance programs. And I got to believe that like in New Jersey, where you can get between $15,000 and $22,000 as a first time buyer, falling into certain income category, that allows you to basically get free money to help you with the down payment and closing costs to buy your first home. And so a lot of times people don't realize if you have a job and you've been able to manage your debt properly, and you're able to make the monthly payment, acquiring what you need to actually make your first purchase is a lot simpler than folks might think. Boils down to what we talked about a little bit earlier. Having the resources, opportunities, and information. The biggest of which sometimes is the information, because if you have the information, that information sometimes can lead you to resources. Some of those resources may be resources that you didn't even know existed.
Awesome. Thank you, sir. I appreciate it.
Oh, you're welcome.
Yeah, and also Gary didn't say he's also the official accountant of Black Men Sundays. He does my taxes as well.
Oh,
So
okay.
yeah, see
Awesome.
Gary liked to leave that out. He's also come on the show a few years ago. That show was from 2022, and it
Right.
still gets a lot of listens to this day.
Awesome. Awesome.
Yeah, man. So I was going to ask you before I let you get out of here, brother Phillip Woolfork out of Trenton, New Jersey, man. You
Mhm.
enjoying yourself on Black Man Sundays?
Oh, I'm enjoying it, man. This is really awesome. This is a great lead up to some other things I have on my plate coming up in later this month and April and May. So it's great to be able to meet you and be introduced to your platform. I think we're going to be seeing more of each other as time goes on.
Oh, definitely. Because I can already, there's a professor that we had on the show, and
Hmm.
he talked about brothers, and he wrote a book about brothers in the C-suite from a mental health perspective.
Oh yeah.
So I'm gonna definitely link you up with him, but I would say definitely listen to that show on Black Men Studies. 'Cause like what I'm trying to do is more symposium style shows, more
Right.
panels where we have mental health experts, we have three or four. We've already done a panel on the elections and all. But let's get back to it real quick
Oh yeah.
before I let you get out of here, because I don't want to eat up your whole Sunday. You probably got a nice
Mhm.
Sunday dinner waiting for you. So before I let you get out of here, one thing that we talk about, obviously, our show is about generational wealth.
Hmm.
We've had brothers on the show that say, we need to close the wealth gap, but then we've had brothers on the show that says, look, they have a 400-year advantage. There's no need to close the wealth gap. What's your
Right.
perspective on the wealth gap?
Well, my perspective is fairly simple, and it's true. They have a 400-year advantage. It's also true that during the 1800s, white settlers and European immigrants were given acres and acres of land to get their lives started financially here for very little money. I think they had to pay whatever the fees were for filing the deeds and whatnot. But when it comes to reparations or any conversation that even sounds like that, when it comes to providing folks who helped build this country with some resource for their free labor, that there needs to be some sort of study done before that can happen. But what I would say is, you know, we get an opportunity to work on closing the wealth gap in a number of ways. Number one, it is basically becoming better at managing the resources that we have. So if you have a job and you're working, what I share with people as I talk around the country is doesn't matter how good of a job you have, there are tons of folks who have, six-figure income jobs and stock options and bonuses and the whole nine yards. My position is you need to make sure that you're not living on every dime, that you're taking a good percentage of that to be able to invest and build wealth from an investment standpoint. And that I think every professional should be able to take a look at what skill sets they have, and in some cases, what they maybe do for hobbies, and if they can monetize that in some way to establish a business. Our tax code is built around supporting entrepreneurship and businesses and people who are putting people to work. It's not necessarily as fair as it could be for people who have a job and a paycheck. And so I think we have an obligation to ourselves and to our families to work continuously on building wealth for ourselves and getting ourselves in a financial situation that the next generation does not have as hard a time economically as we may have had.
What's your financial strategy as far as allocating your money? Like I saw in the essay, you said invest 50% of discretionary dollars.
Mhm.
But let's talk about that 50%. I've had brothers come on with the 10-10-10 rule. There's different strategies out there.
Oh
But from
yeah.
from your point of view,
Oh yeah.
what's your financial allocation strategy?
Well, I like the 10-10-10 approach in terms of allocation, that you're basically saving or investing at least 10% of your funds. When I talk to people who are professionals who have, 401ks and different programs like that on their jobs, my strategy has always been with that is to maximize your contribution into your 401k, especially if you have a corporate match, because to the degree that you're not maximizing your own contribution, you're leaving money on the table as it relates to the match. The other thing I think that folks have to understand is that giving and philanthropy is also a part of your wealth strategy. And I find that if that's part of your wealth strategy, you tend to get into places where you become more blessed by through your giving and through your philanthropy. And so opportunities tend to come your way that may not have come your way otherwise. And we don't have time on the show to go through all that, but I could tell you from my personal experience, I've been in situations where I've given my last dime only to end up with a windfall a couple of days later. And so I think giving is very necessary. When we talked a little bit in Foundations of Change about the surplus, what I'm referencing really in that is that you have a lot of people who do a lot of spending. They don't really keep track of their spending. But if they look at how much they spend eating out, if they have lunch every day and don't take their lunch to work, they're eating out every day for lunch. They may stop at their favorite place for coffee every day. They're spending money there. They may be spending also a lot on salty snacks and sodas and other refreshments that are not necessarily the healthiest for you. They may also be spending money in fast food places that are also not healthy for you. If you start looking at that type of spending, which in my view is not really necessary spending, you're spending a significant amount of money that could be saved and invested. And so if folks took a real hard look at where they're spending their money, how they're spending their money, how it's impacting them economically, and how it's impacting their health, then if they made those drastic changes, they'd find that there's probably a lot more money there to save and invest than they would give themselves credit for. But absolutely, as a bottom line of it all is we have to stop living on every dime. When you get your paycheck, 100% of your paycheck coming in and 100% of your paycheck going out, is not a recipe for wealth creation. It's a recipe for poverty.
For brothers that are trying to find Triumph in the Trenches Volume 2, where can they get that book?
Well, we have for volume 2, we have 10 co-authors. All of us are marketing the book ourselves individually. And so for folks who are listening to the show and looking for a copy of volume 1 or Triumph in the Trenches, the first book, they can get a copy from my website, phillipwoolfolk.com. They can order a copy there, and we'll get a copy out to you.
All right. Well, there you have it, man. Phillip Woolfolk. Thanks for coming on Black Men Sundays, man. We appreciate you. Appreciate your time answering the questions. I'm gonna definitely check that book out. Man, this was a great conversation. We covered so many topics. So
Oh, yeah.
yeah, man. So enjoy the rest of this day and enjoy your week.
Oh, thank you so much, Corey, for having me. It's been super meeting with you and meeting with other folks on your team here, and look forward to staying in touch.
It's a black man Sunday.